So welcome to this talk on evangelizing the social media, society, and culture. And what we want to do is understand social media so that we can evangelize both a culture that is very saturated in social media and evangelize on social media, which I think are two slightly different things that we'll get into as we go through these 4 sessions. Our first session is going to be on the background, what is social media. Second session is more on the mindset. The third and fourth sessions are evangelizing the culture and via social media. So let's just start with a very simple thing. Who is the second most influential priest on social media in the US? Here are the top 6 after that. So we're going to pull them up. Cardinal Sean O'Malley, Bishop Robert Barron, Father Jonathan Morris, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Archbishop Julian Gomez, and myself. Who do you think is the most popular? Now, you would probably guess that maybe O'Malley or maybe Dolan or something, but according to Klout, which is a site that ranks social media influence, the most influential is myself by a significant margin. Now, of course, none of you are really going to believe that. Most of you are going to say, are you really the most important? But I think this shows a weakness in social media. It's a difference of how social media operates versus how kind of an external influence operates. Online, what is influence? And this is according to Klout, the same website I used to do those rankings. Klout ranks it out of 100, so things like CNN and BBC and Wall Street Journal like 99, and somebody who never posts on social media is like a 2. And anything over like 60 is pretty influential. But influence here is the ability to drive action, which is numerical. And it's all ad-driven, it's all commercial. The vast majority of the revenue of both Google and Facebook and even Twitter comes from ads. That's how they make their money. They make their money by selling ads. So Klout makes their money by giving away free products that will be as if ads. If they give me a free iPad or something and then I tweet about this iPad, well, that's an ad basically for that iPad that was paid for instead of indirectly by giving me the free iPad. And that's how Klout works, and that's the kind of things they're looking at. I think Klout has a little issue that it overemphasizes Twitter. I think on other forms of social media, some of these other people I mentioned in the previous one would really beat me out because I'm the best at Twitter, and I fully admit that I have like 44,000 followers on Twitter, and number 2 is Instagram with like 9,000. So it's obviously a big difference there. And then there's a guy named Sam Fiorella who played this Klout score, and he increased his Klout score from 34 to 72. And in marketing, he got more job offers off of changing his Klout score by 40 than off of 15 years of being a marketer and consultant. Now, if you could think that in 6 months jumping like that is more important than 15 years of experience, that just shows how important these types of metrics are today. So who am I? I just want to go through a bit of my story. A lot of people have heard of me on social media, but they don't know the whole background. So in high school, I really turned away from my faith. I still went to Mass, and my dad was basically like, look, you go to Mass or you pay rent. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to pay rent, how many hours do I need to work? Well, that's more than going to Mass, so let's just go to Mass. And I really didn't, on a sense, believe it or anything. But then about, grade 11, I really had a strong experience, realized Jesus was real. And I almost became Protestant because at my church, I couldn't think of one person between about 12 and 25 who was really excited about their faith. And in the city, I ran into a whole bunch of Protestants who were like, But what saved me was actually some of these message boards, Catholic message boards, and even Christian ones that were kind of the precursor of social media. And 2001, I entered a religious life, and I really wasn't active on social media at all or any kind of message boards for a decade, pretty much. 2010, I finished working in youth ministry. 4 years ago to Rome, and I'm like, hey, I want to talk about youth ministry with some of the people back in the States. So I started writing a blog, and nobody read it. My mom read it, but that was about it. And so I asked around to some friends who I knew in real life, and they said, well, you got to put it on social media, put it on Twitter or Facebook. So I started Twitter and Facebook, and somehow it turned out that I was actually really good at them. I didn't even go out with that intention. One of the big things that started me from like just, a whoever to really being more of an influential name is when Pope Benedict resigned. I ran a campaign called Thanks Pontifex to thank the Pope for all his years of serving the church. And that got a lot of action. It was, at least one cardinal tweeted about it, and it was covered in a few different Catholic media sites and things. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And then just because of my ministry and because of the different things going on in my life and the different kind of interests, Slowly my commentary moved from a youth ministry focus to a more general Catholic focus. So we went through the outline at the beginning. Each one of these talks should be 20 to 30 minutes. So this talk is going to have two parts. What is social media and a little bit of history of social media. First, what is social media? A big view from 30,000 feet. Here's a statement I think that a lot of people might disagree with, but I think it's a realistic statement. Social media is likely the biggest shift since the Industrial Revolution. It's the biggest shift in how we communicate, how we operate since, really we started mechanizing things. And just as one example of that, how long did it take to reach 50 million users, which is a pretty big user base? Radio took 38 years, so like almost a generation. TV took a decade, 11 years. Facebook took about half a year to get from nothing to 50 million users, which is amazing. Today, 3 billion people are on social media. In the world, there's like 7 billion people, and not even 3 billion of them live in free democratic societies. So we're talking about a huge population on social media, almost half the world. And it's not just a fad, there's a difference in how we communicate when we're on social media. It changes how we communicate. So now I'm going to go with a definition. I'm going to use two definitions. I'm going to start with a little more technical one that some of you might say like, oof, a little confusing. Don't worry about it. The second definition is a lot more simplified, but I think the first one's valuable because it has those terms, the technical terms that you might hear elsewhere, so you understand, okay, where do these terms fit in? So the first one, it's from Kaplan and Hanley. Social media is a group of internet-based applications that build on the ideological and technical foundations of Web 2.0 that allow the creating and exchange of user-generated content. So what are those things? The first thing we notice is there's an ideology. It's not just a pure technology, because technology implies an ideology even if it's not explicit. A lot of times it's implicit. And it's really important that we understand what the ideology is behind a certain technology so that we can judge how we use it. Web 2.0 really means a way that are collaborative, multi-directional, and constant flux. Back in the day, when I started using the internet in the 90s, most sites are just like, you go to the site and it would be pretty static. CNN would update, once or twice a day saying, hey, here's the top stories of the day, but everything would be pretty static. Today I log into Facebook, it shows me one thing. I log in 5 minutes later, it's going to show me something else on the top of my Facebook feed. Same with my Twitter feed. And it's creation and exchange of user-generated content, because a distinction is before it was really just the professionals who created the content, and then there'd be lots of people reading it. But now, almost everybody has Facebook shares status updates at least every so often. Like today, I don't know about you, but I know about like most people getting engaged or having kids from Facebook more than anything else. Now here's a simplified definition. It's from Meredith Gold, and it's social media are web-based tools for interaction that in addition to conversation allow users to share content such as photos, videos, and links to resources. And resources just here any kind of content. And you can see how this is a little simpler. It doesn't have all the technical terms, and hopefully it's helpful for understanding the internet. So what is the influence of social media? Right now, the average American spends 2.5 hours on social media a day. 41% of their time online. That means that like the average person spends more than 5 hours a day online. Yeah, really. So if you ever thought, oh, I spend a lot of time online, actually you're probably not like way over the average today. And it's 11% of their day. 11% of the average American's day is social media. Like 11% of our day is eating. That's the kind of level we're looking at. And for those of you under 30, social media has far surpassed newspapers and equal TV as a primary source of daily news. And that was back in 2012. I haven't seen what it would be today, but it's way surpassed. For younger people, even myself, I'm in my mid-30s. Like, I get 95% of my news from social media, and I have no shame in admitting that. And in 2015, 57% of millennials logged into Facebook at least once a day to get news and information, not just to find that their friend's kid drew a dinosaur and it looked funny, and so their friend posted a picture of their kid's drawing. But now we're going to go into the history. What is the history of social media? How do we get here? And why? How does social media stand out as a form of human communication? And this history is not what you're going to expect. I'm just going to warn you, we're not starting with internet web. We're going like way back. So get ready for how far back we're going. We're going back 56 million years to the evolution of primates. That's the estimate according to the best biologists. I'm not a biologist, I'm just trusting them. And one of the things that's interesting about primates is primates, including human beings, have a much larger neocortex, which is a part of the brain. It's not really important where the neocortex is. The important part about the neocortex is super important for social relationships. And primates tend to have more complicated social relationships than any other types of animals. And one of the things is that the size of the neocortex and the group size are proportional. So like if the neocortex is this percentage of your brain of a primate, if it goes up, the size of the normal group of those primates goes up as well. Some primates generally are in smaller groups, like 5, and some are in bigger groups like 30, 50. And there's a almost direct proportion between the two, which is interesting. We can look at how Benedict XVI talks about this. The desire for connectedness and the instinct for communication are modern manifestations of the basic enduring propensity of human beings to reach beyond themselves and seek communication with others. So human beings seek to have communication with others, seek to be part of that community. And now we go back 200,000 years or so, Homo sapiens sapiens, us. We have the biggest neocortex ever, by far, of any animal. And 20% of our energy is dedicated just to our brain. If you think of our brain is like the size of our 2 fists, and so it's not that big compared to the whole body, but it takes 1/5 of our energy. For every 5 bites of food you eat, 1 of those bites goes to feed your brain. The other 4 go to feed the rest of your body. And so the natural size of a human thing, following the same line of correlation between the neocortex size and the group size from primates, the 150. It's called the Dunbar number. And it's a really interesting thing when you look at social media, you look at human interactions, because it's based on neocortex size, and anthropology proves it too. If you look at most societies before industrialization, most societies, most towns tend to be in the 120, 170 size. Because at 150 or so, it's not like a precise exact number, 150 exactly, I can know every other person in the group, and every other person in the group can know me. But if you get much beyond that, there's people in the group I don't know. Even though I know probably a bunch of other people who also know them, if it's only 300 or something. But a human being can, on a practical level, know about 150 people well. Not just hey, I know your name and I can recognize your face, but really knowing the person. And that's kind of the natural size of a human community, in a sense. And it's interesting that depending on, I've found on 2 different sources that the median size of social networks is either one source says 120 to 130 for Facebook, the other one said about 200. So the average person on Facebook actually has a group of friends about the size of a natural human community, which is actually kind of surprising that this whole super technology we think of totally different actually corresponds to in something about the natural size of a human community. Going back to social media history, we have 59 BC, the Acta Diurna Populi, which is the daily acts of Rome. So the Romans were the first literate society, at least in the upper levels of society, that we have. The first there was wide literacy that we have, and we have history of, because there may have been others, but the history disappeared, so we don't know the details enough to know how they interacted on a daily basis. And there was a lot of regular correspondence via a wax tablet, where they'd have one of the nobles would write something on this wax tablet and give it to a slave and say, hey, go and give this to my friend across town. And the friend would look at it and write something back, and the slave would have to run back to its master with the wax tablet with the extra writing on it. But that would be almost like messaging today. It just wasn't instant. It was the time the slave took it to run across town. And wax tablets were used because they were reusable. You could just smooth the wax over and write it again, as opposed to writing on papyrus something, once the papyrus is written on, you can't reuse it. And they copied and distributed the Acta Diurna Populi a lot. So what would happen is that every day in the Roman Forum, they put up this big, basically like the newspaper, and have all the things, at the gladiatorial fights, so-and-so beat so-and-so. In the Senate, so-and-so gave a speech on this, and so-and-so gave a speech on this, and things. And then they copy out. There's an interesting story of Cicero. So Cicero was at his vacation house, and he had his friend back in Rome. And his friend was copying him out the Acta Diurna Populi, basically the public newspaper of the day, and sent it to him, and he sent back, and he said, look, I don't need to know about the gladiatorial fights. I really don't care. But I also, when you tell me about the news of so-and-so gave a speech, give me your opinion on what their speech was like, because I trust you and I trust your judgment. At that time, it was just the basic one-line news story of what happened was what was there. And then we see Luther, Thomas Paine and the U.S. Revolution and the Enlightenment. There was a lot of the same kind of thing where they'd copy it out and single people to single people. Early newspapers were really kind of like social media, a lot more than modern newspapers. Because in early newspaper, one or two guys working in a shop, and they'd basically get the newspapers from other towns and write out the stories from there. And then people would send in this letter or this kind of thing, and they'd choose, do I like this guy politically or not? And if I like him, I'll print it out. If I don't, in the trash, And there'd be newspapers in town. There'd be like the Democrat newspaper and the Federalist newspaper in town, the early U.S. Republic. And it's really interesting that every literate society that we have enough history on seems to develop something akin to social media. But we have a little bit of a drop in the social media in 1833, the New York Sun. The New York Sun was the first of what they called the penny papers. And the difference of the penny papers was, instead of getting most of the money from subscribers, their actual main source of revenue was ads. And instead of just getting all these speeches and writing out, they actually hired reporters. They were the first ones to kind of hire a bunch of reporters to go out and report on things in the city. And it really became much more of a one-way, where it's just this massive conglomerate sending information, rather than something where the letters to the editor or speeches somebody sent to them are a huge set. And this is the first non-social media, the first mass media. Radio and TV follow suit. Radio starts kind of as more social media individual, and then it morphs into much more of a mass media form. In 1969, there was ARPANET, which is the first internet, where they connect a whole bunch of universities. And they kind of had a social media between university researchers. So it was interesting, even back then, in 69, they'd have restaurant reviews. But it's interesting because like all the computers are based at this university, so the further you got from the university, the like less reliable the reviews were, because it'd be like one review of this restaurant, way out there. Whereas like the restaurants right beside the university would be like 5 reviews. So you could say, this is a good restaurant or not, just like Yelp today or something, Except for Yelp today is so much more widely distributed that you actually get a good number of views on almost any restaurant you go to. The World Wide Web, 1989, it's key interconnected pages and also images and pages. Because a lot of these first ones are just text. And one of the things about the internet that we all just take for granted today is there can be text or a picture, and if you click on it, you'll go to another page, or if you click on most pictures, it will blow up the picture and show it bigger on your screen and things. And that was actually a big revolution, and even putting pictures in it, because it was just like pure text before. And it was interesting that Tom Standage, who wrote Writing on the Wall, the first 2,000 years of social media, he's been the source for a lot of this. He says that many of the conventions in the age of pamphleteering, the Reformation, the American Revolution, were deliberately or unwittingly revived. That they just copied the same things. Like in the old newspapers, they'd take a quote from somebody else and then they're a student, they take another quote. And how many blogs you've seen that's like basically that? It's like quote from somebody they disagree with, proof that they're wrong. Another quote from that person, proof that they're wrong. And that's exactly what pamphleteering would do. And in 2004, you have kind of the end of the 171-year reign of mass media. What happened in 2004 is 60 Minutes put forward these documents that made George W. Bush's military service look really bad. And all these bloggers went through and proved that these documents were false. Like, they were written on this typewriter that wasn't made at the time that they were supposedly written, and there were all kinds of like little errors in it. And this led to Dan Rather, who used to be the head of CBS News and was like one of the big anchors, like one of the biggest people in mass media. He had to resign like a year later, and a lot of it was this. And that really changed it from the mass media having control to the mass media no longer having control. And anyone could publish. Until the internet existed, less than 1% of people published. By about 2006, about 4% of people published. And now you have about 40% of people have published something. Because if you write on social media, had a great hot dog today, that's in a way publishing. Sure, it's not the way that you think of traditional publishing, like I wrote a book and I had an editor and all that, but it's still publishing. And so it's a radical difference in the last 15 years or so, where we went from like a fraction of a percent to 40% of people on Earth. There's a lot of history, different ones. The first one's 6 Degrees, Friendster, MySpace, which are all kind of dead. 2006, we have Facebook. And it's interesting how the news feed is a return to the Enlightenment coffee house, where there'd be a random thing. If you go on Facebook and you look at your news feed, at least mine, it's the first one, so-and-so got engaged. Second one, discussion about something the Pope said. Third one, discussion about something in U.S. politics. Fourth one, somebody's proud of what they grew in their garden. It's completely random in that sense. But that was how it was back in the Enlightenment coffee shop, where you have all these postings of everything. And so Twitter, we have a quote from De Costello, likened Twitter to a global town, a reinvention of the Roman form of the Greek agora, in which people can exchange views directly rather than get information from a small number of centralized, filtered sources, newspaper, radio, TV. And that's exactly what it is. And so I think a lot of what we've got here is, you go back to Standage, who's like a big source for this whole talk, is we have something that social media is actually in a way natural to human beings. That's actually like surprising, because people think it's like this totally new radical thing, but if you think about it in this way, it's actually natural. So here's his epilogue, and we're almost done. After 150 years hiatus, during which the person-to-person aspect of media was overshadowed by centralized mass media operating on a broadcast model, the pendulum has swung back. We often talk about how new internet media versus old broadcast media, but old media, it should now be apparent, is something of a historical anomaly, not the natural way of things. And the rebirth of social media in the internet age represents a profound shift and return in many respects to the way things used to be. Now this is our last slide. Now the summary of what we just talked about. Social media's way of sharing user-generated content over the web through tools of interpersonal communication and collaboration, kind of a rephrasing of our definition. It's an important, not a trend. It's the biggest change to the Industrial Revolution. And we're wired for social media, both in natural human history, which naturally gives us a social group about 150, which is what social media tends to. Most literate societies had developed some form of social media, and the mass media is actually an anomaly that just happened for 171 years, which happened to be most of the memory of our parents, grandparents. Very few of them were alive in 1833. I doubt any of them were. So we have that, and that's a change in how society operates.